Hi, and welcome back to Purple Collar Life. In today's video, we're talking about electric vehicles. Yes, I'm by the Mustang Mach-E here, but today's video is actually about 10 years with our Chevy Volt. What it's like having an electric vehicle for the last 10 years. Now let's talk about drive modes for a minute. Down here on the right hand side you can see a button that says drive mode, and when I push it, that lets us cycle between what we're in right now, which is normal, which will use all the battery first before switching over to the generator to generate electricity. Next down is sport. That gives you all kinds of immediate response torque if you push the gas pedal. It's a fun mode to drive in, but it does use the battery faster. Next down is mountain, which means it'll only let the battery get down to the halfway point. You can see that red line on the battery now. It'll use the battery down to that point, then it'll run the generator to maintain the battery at halfway level. So if you're climbing lots of mountains in a terrain like we have, where you might need that battery backup to help you accelerate up over a hill at 65 or 70 miles an hour if you're on the interstate, then it maintains one half the battery just for climbing mountains and uses the generator to constantly regenerate electricity to keep the battery at half. And then the last mode is hold. That means, you can see it moved the red line, hold the battery level exactly where it's at. So I use that when I'm on the interstate traveling 70 miles an hour to hold the battery for when I'm in city driving, and I can drive a long ways in the city because you use less battery traveling at stop and go speeds than you do traveling down the highway at 70 miles an hour with the heated seat on and the defroster and the heater, especially in wintertime. So hold mode, you can see it kicked the engine on, so the engine is generating electricity to propel us up this hill while still maintaining that exact battery level. Now if I push it again and go back to normal mode, the engine will turn off and we'll just use the battery to climb. If I hit the leaf button over here, you can see what's happening with power. So right now you can see we're running on battery power to accelerate, but if I let off the gas a little bit, we're regenning. Instead of the engine giving us power, we're just allowing the front wheels to regenerate power as if they were braking back to the battery. Push the gas again, you can see we're using battery power now to drive. The other thing you can watch is the Accel and decel. So the harder you push the gas, the more that ball goes up out of the efficiency range with the leaves circling. And if you decelerate too fast, instead of taking advantage of the regen, you're just wasting braking energy. So you want to try to keep the ball placed right in that circle where the leaves are going, and that gives you the best efficiency with the battery in this Chevy Volt. The Chevy Volt is a really fun vehicle to drive. It's got lots of get up and go. It's super quiet. If you've never owned an electric vehicle before, it's amazing how much quieter a drive can be when you don't have an engine running. So for demonstration purposes, on this 7-mile drive, you can see I used battery for 5.7 miles And since I put it in hold mode and mountain mode for part of the drive, we used gasoline for 1.3 miles. We used 0.07 gallons of gasoline and 2.1 kilowatt hours of electricity. Our average for this drive was 130 miles per gallon. The lifetime average in this car, like I said before, 68.7 miles per gallon. Over 162,000 miles. So in 2014, I was an early adopter of this Chevy Volt. Now, I know some people are heavily against electric vehicles, and some people are heavily in favor of them. I'm really neither. But when I started doing the research at the time in 2014 about my drive, I drive about 165 miles a day. At that time, I had the opportunity to drive to work, charge the car while I was at work, and then drive home. One of the things I really like about the Chevy Volt is it's not strictly electronic vehicle. It's what they would call today a plug-in hybrid, somewhat. The Chevy Volt's a very unique system. The drive line is always connected to the battery. So it's technically an electric vehicle because it only gets its power, propulsion power, from the battery. But it does have a gas generator, an engine, a 4-cylinder engine in the front of it that runs on gasoline to generate electricity to power the drive wheels when you need to. So unlike some other vehicles where the engine is also connected to the drive line, in the Chevy Volt, the drive line is strictly connected to the battery, which classifies it as an EV, even though it does take gasoline and does run an engine when it needs to. But what I really liked about the Chevy Volt in 2014 was I knew my drives were going to be beyond the range of the battery, beyond 35, 40, 45. I've had 52 miles on the battery in my lifetime. So I knew I was going to be beyond that in my drive with the 160-mile round-trip commute. And I liked that there would be a gas generator, so I didn't have that range anxiety of how long until I can get somewhere. Am I going to be ending up dead along the side of the road with the battery that's completely out of juice? So that was part of the reason I really liked the idea of the Chevy Volt. I also really like the technology built into this car. So for a 2014, a lot of this was really high-end technology. We have, of course, cruise control. We do have collision avoidance, so that if you start accelerating faster than the car in front of you, it will let off the gas. And in some cases, if you're in low range mode, which I drive a lot in low range mode to regenerate more electricity, then it'll actually slow you down before you would make contact with the car in front of you. Has lane departure, which for its day in 2014 was pretty high-end feature. Of course, it has Bluetooth and all that other technology. It also has heated seats, automatic climate control, Bluetooth connection, multiple drive modes. So in 2014, when we bought this car, this was the most technology advanced vehicle I had ever owned. And the other thing was safety. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe this has 9 airbags, maybe more. So for its day, 9 airbags is really good. The other really good thing about the Chevy Volt, since it's got the battery pack like a T-shape from alongside the console here to below the rear seats, it's got a really nice low center of gravity. Handles really well on turns and on drives, but also we live in a snow climate. So all that extra weight with a set of winter wheels and tires, which I always put on, makes this thing get around really good in the snow. This is the best in the snow front-wheel drive vehicle of any vehicle that I've owned previously, and it's because of that weight and the technology of the limited slip and knowing exactly what drive to put to each servo drive on each wheel. It does a great job of getting around in the snow. Okay, so like I said, I was an early adopter, and this was, remember, we live in oil and gas country. This was like the only Chevy Volt I saw in oil and gas country for probably 5 years. Didn't see another one in the area that we live. And there weren't charging stations or anything like that, so I did put a 240 volt charger in my garage that charges this car in about 4 hours. When it's plugged into 110 volt power to charge, it takes somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, depending on whether you're charging at 12 amps or at 8 amps. Currently, this 2014 Chevy Volt has 172,632 miles on it. And if you're wondering, what have we had to do to it over the last 10 years? Maintenance costs have been very minimal. So I've got a list here of things we've done. We've done the rear rotors multiple times, and I'll show you pictures. What happens is because you're regenerating so much electricity when you slow down, you hardly ever use the brakes. So the rear brakes actually get rusted over pretty quickly. We've had them resurfaced a couple times. We've replaced them once. So we have had to replace the rear rotors just because of inactivity. We've had to do the brakes once. I've done 4 sets of tires, and we've talked in previous videos about the tires we've had on this. They were the Goodyear Assurance tires from the factory. We did another set of those. Then we did a set of Pirellis, and now we've got the General tires on it. I'll put a link to the General tire video up above. These are holding up really good for us. A lot of features about them that I really like. We did have to do the battery coolant pump. That was a fairly expensive repair, and by fairly expensive, I'm talking like $500, $600, $700 roughly. And then the transmission solenoid that was under $1,000, I think it was like $600 or $700 for it. We did have to do in the last year a wheel speed sensor in the rotor of one of the front wheels. And when those start to go bad, what happens is it starts misunderstanding the information. The speedometer's a little bit weird. It tries to kick in traction control. When you're going in the just in and out the bumps of the driveway, it acts like you're spinning or slipping. So that's definitely something that has to get repaired as soon as it pops up. As soon as it pops up as an issue. And then we have replaced the 12-volt battery, which is an expensive one because it sits inside the cabin of the car, so it's not a standard lead-acid battery. So that was about a $280 battery. But again, in 172,000 miles of driving this vehicle, those are the only things we've spent money on. I did mention about the sets of winter and summer tires. It's really nice to have winter tires on a separate set of rims. I've got 16-inch tires I run in the winter. This takes 17-inch tires in the summer. I'll show a picture of what the American Racing rims and tires are that I use on this vehicle in the wintertime. And I have the relearn tool. I think it was like $30. I'll put a link to it in the description. The relearn tool reprograms the car to the second set of rims in the wintertime and then back to the summer tires. So it's a nice thing to be able to change over your own tires in the wintertime. Now let's talk a little bit about battery degradation. So over 10 years I've driven this vehicle. After about 7 years, we actually let our 16-year-old daughter start driving it, and she's been driving it now for over 3 years. So this has been her back and forth to college vehicle. It's a super reliable vehicle. It's a safe vehicle, and that's why we decided to let this be the vehicle that she would drive to school. Not only to her high school days, but now to her college days. But the 7 years prior to that, this was my daily driver, 165 miles round trip per day to work. And I couldn't have been more happy with it. It does a great job in the snow. It's fun to drive. It's quiet. It's reliable. It had all the features I wanted in a vehicle in 2014, and those features were all beneficial even to this day. So do we have regrets about buying this vehicle? Absolutely not. We're going to keep it as long as we can, keep it running on the road. But people always wonder, how about the battery degradation? Well, I don't have one of those tools that reads each cell of the battery and tells you how much it's degraded. But I can tell you that in the wintertime, this used to get about 26 miles to a charge, because in the wintertime you're running your seats, the heated seats, the defroster, the heater, and it takes more battery power to keep the battery the right temperature. There is a pump that pumps fluid around the battery that keeps those cells at appropriate temperature for the longest life possible. So in the wintertime I used to get about 26, now it's down to about 24. In the summertime, I used to get about 45 miles on a charge, sometimes higher. I have gotten as high as 52 in the past, but now it's down to about 42. So yes, it seems like a little bit of degradation, but it also might be some changes we've made. These General tires are a little bit heavier than the original low rolling resistance Goodyear Assurance tires that gave us so many flat tires with those really thin rubber sidewalls. Another thing is that maybe we drive a little bit different now. I know that Jennifer and Mackenzie drive this differently than I did. When I was going to and from work, I would constantly use the drive mode. If I'm climbing up a hill, I'd put it in hold mode, not waste extra battery going up a hill when I could use it for flat stretches. When I was going fast on the interstate, I'd use the hold mode. I would only use normal mode for the conditions that would give me the best mileage. So that's how I would get 50, 51, 52 miles out of the battery range on my drive to work. Then it would charge while I was at work, doing the same thing coming home. I would average about 100 miles that I was running on battery rather than gasoline out of the 160 some mile commute. And at the time, my lifetime battery average was over 114 miles per gallon. That's really good considering how many miles I was driving every single day. Now our lifetime mileage, you can see, is at 68.7. So we've come down quite a bit because there aren't as many charging opportunities for Mackenzie during the week at school. So for a while, it doesn't get charged and she drives around on just the gasoline. And remember, that's one of the things I liked about the Volt is if the battery is depleted, you can drive around just on gasoline. Now, since the battery is 10 years old, what we have Mackenzie do, what I recommend she does, is that she never lets the battery get below half. So she can drive it in mountain mode, she can drive it in hold mode, but until she gets close to home, she leaves half the battery capacity just to maintain the battery temperature. So when this car is sitting in the winter time at her school, the battery can be used to help maintain the battery so that it lasts even longer for us. So it's true that electric vehicles aren't for everyone, and I'm not sure even today that I would want one that's exclusively electric. But I can tell you that after 10 years and 172,000 miles of ownership of this Chevy Volt, we are extremely happy with it. It's been exactly what we expected of it, and I would say that if we had a chance to get another one, if we could go back in time, back to 2014 or 15, buy a second one of these for Jennifer, we would have run around with 2 Chevy Volts all this time, saving all that gasoline, comfortable drive, nice kind of technology advanced vehicle for all these years with very few problems. I hope you enjoyed this video today on Purple Color Life about our experience of 10 years and still rolling with this electric vehicle. If you've got questions, please leave those down in the comments. I'd be happy to answer any that I know the answers to. And if you've been the proud owner of a Chevy Volt, go ahead and leave your comments down below. Now remember, it's not exactly like we are huge electric vehicle proponents. This was a great vehicle for us all these years. But we've also had a 1-ton diesel truck for 17 years. We now have a 7.3 liter gasoline engine truck. So I think we balance things out. We use gasoline excessively in some cases, like in the boat with a 351 engine and in the big truck towing the camper and using the diesel towing the camper. But then we balance things out with our electric vehicle as a daily driver. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative and entertaining, please give us a big thumbs up. Leave those comments down below. And then hopefully we'll see you again the next time. Another thing that I haven't mentioned, we do live here in Pennsylvania salt country, and the Chevy Volt is the only vehicle we've owned that we've never undercoated because I wasn't exactly sure what the oil would do as it seeped into the battery. So, never undercoated, but as you can see, 10 years of Northwest Pennsylvania driving in snow and salt and slush, no rust on this vehicle at all. It has held up extremely well. This may be one of the best cars I've ever owned in my entire life.